The Grand Plaza Ballroom was not just a room, it was a statement of obscene wealth. I had read about it, but reading is a pale, thin thing compared to the reality. The ceiling was painted with angels and clouds, looking down on us sinners with gilded indifference. The crystal chandeliers were weeping light, thousands of perfect, agonizing splinters of it, catching on diamonds that looked heavy as ice cubes and sequins that shimmied like fish scales. It was a sea of glittering fakes and surgically enhanced perfection, and I was the only piece of driftwood. The air was thick, suffocating. It was heavy with the scent of competing perfumes, so many expensive flowers battling for dominance, and underneath it all, the metallic tang of champagne and the low, self-satisfied murmur of New York's absolute elite. This was not my world. I knew it. They knew it. Every polite smile that slid right past me, every pair of eyes that cataloged my dress and dismissed me in the same instant, confirmed it. I clutched my small, beaded clutch, the one I had found at the bottom of a bin for $1. My hands were damp inside my thin gloves. Another thrift find. I was Sophia Bell, 28 years old, and I felt like a fraud, a child playing dress-up in her mother's closet. But this was not my mother's. My mother had never owned anything this formal. It was a dress from a shop on the Lower East Side, a place that smelled of mothballs and forgotten histories. It was silk. I thought, once, maybe back in the 1970s. It was a deep emerald green that I had loved under the dim, dusty fluorescent lights of the store. Here, under the surgical glare of 1,000 electric bulbs, it was just old. It was tidy. I had spent 2 days, 2 entire evenings after my shift, restitching the hem where the silk had pulled, reinforcing the delicate zipper, but it was thrift. And in this room, thrift was a 4-letter word. It was a disease. I tried to make myself small, hugging the velvet rope perimeter near the enormous potted ferns. The leaves were waxy, probably fake. I watched them, the women, with their surgically smooth faces and hair tortured into gleaming helmets. Their gowns cost more than my apartment building. I had seen one woman, whose name I recognized from the gossip pages, laugh, a brittle, sharp sound, and the diamonds around her throat looked angry. The men were just as bad, loud in their bespoke suits, booming laughs that held no genuine humor, only assertion. They were peacocks, all of them, strutting and preening, assessing each other's value with quick, reptilian glances. I was a sparrow, a small, brown sparrow that had flown in through an open window by mistake. Then the air changed. It did not just shift, it pressurized. The ambient noise, that confident, interlocking hum of chatter, dipped. It faltered. People did not stop talking, not completely, but their attention pivoted, drawn by an invisible, communal string toward the grand staircase. He was not announced. He did not need to be. Vincenzo De Luca. Even I knew the name. You could not live in this city, even in the parts I lived in, and not know it. It was a name whispered in coffee shops when the delivery trucks were late. It was a name hissed in back alleys when disputes were settled without police. A name that meant power, the kind that did not bother with the stock market or social media, the kind that was old, Italian, and absolute. He was tall. He wore a black suit that seemed tailored from shadows, cut so perfectly it moved with him like a second skin. He moved with a stillness, an economy of motion that was almost predatory. He was not handsome in the way the pretty, clean-cut boys by the bar were. His face was all angles and harsh planes, a Roman nose that looked like it had been broken and reset just slightly off-center. It made him look more real than anyone else. His jaw was unforgiving, looked like it could crack walnuts. But his eyes, they were dark, and they missed nothing. A woman near me, draped in what looked like a genuine platinum fox stole, clutched her champagne flute. She whispered to her companion, her voice tight with awe. I heard he rented the entire floor. The entire floor, just so he wouldn't have to share the elevators with the others. Her friend, a man with a face like a pampered poodle, fanned himself. Darling, he is the elevator. He decides who goes up. He bypassed the receiving line where the mayor himself was standing. The mayor, who had looked right through me, actually inclined his head, a small, nervous bow. Vincenzo ignored him. People parted for him, a wave receding from a shark's fin. He did not acknowledge them. His gaze swept the room, not with interest, not with pleasure, but with the profound, heavy boredom of an emperor surveying a territory he already owned. His gaze said this was all trivial. I pressed back further into the leaves of the fern, the waxy leaf scratching my cheek. I welcomed the small pain. It grounded me. I just wanted the night to end. I wanted my small, walk-up apartment, a cup of peppermint tea, and the familiar, comforting scent of my own soap. I was tired of feeling scrutinized, tired of being invisible, and, at the same time, overwhelmingly, painfully visible. I must have looked away, down at my worn clutch, counting the beads on the strap. 1, 2, 3. Just for a second, when I looked back up, he was looking directly at me. It was not a glance. It was not a polite scan of the room. His focus was singular. It was a physical thing. It was a spotlight, a rifle scope. It pinned me to the wall. My heart did not flutter. It stopped. It seized in my chest, a cold, hard knot of pure, undiluted panic. This was not a banker. This was not a real estate mogul looking for a mistress. This was Vincenzo De Luca. Men like him did not look at women like me. Not unless something was terribly wrong. Had I witnessed something, was I in the way? I looked behind me, frantically. Was he looking at the senator standing 10 feet to my left? The senator was sweating. I noticed. No. His eyes were on mine. They were flat, analytical, and held a depth of darkness I could not begin to comprehend. There was no smile, no warmth, no invitation, just inventory. He was taking stock of me. The thrift store dress, the mended hem, the cheap clutch, the anxiety rolling off me in waves thick as cheap perfume. I felt like he could see the $1 price tag still stuck to the inside of my shoe. I could not breathe. My lungs had turned to cement. My palms were slick. He began to move. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. He did not thread his way through the crowd. The crowd sensed him. They dissolved. People stepped back, bumping into each other, creating a wide, clear path from him to me. It was magnificent and terrifying. He walked across the parquet floor, his expensive, handmade leather shoes making no sound at all. He was coming toward me. The whispers started, louder this time, now that they had a target. Who is she? Nobody? Look at her dress. Is that a joke? Maybe she is the help. She must have done something wrong. I wanted to run. I physically tried to command my legs to move, to turn and flee through the service entrance I had eyed earlier. But I was frozen, paralyzed. That gaze held me tighter than any rope. He stopped. He was 2 feet away. He blocked out the light from the chandeliers. He smelled like expensive whiskey, the peaty, smoky kind, and clean, sharp ozone, like the air right before a lightning strike. He was taller than I had realized. I had to tilt my head back, my neck aching. Up close, his eyes were not just dark, they were an old, deep, impossible brown, flecked with something that might have been gold, or might have been malice. A thin white scar cut through his left eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline. The silence around us was now total, absolute. The music, some forgettable classical piece, seemed to be playing miles away, in another building, the entire ballroom. All that money and all that power was holding its collective breath. Vincenzo De Luca looked at me, this 28-year-old sparrow in her second-hand dress. He did not offer his hand. He did not smile. His face was a mask of indifference. His voice, when it came, was low, a rumble that vibrated right through my sternum and down into the soles of my feet. It was gravel and velvet. Dance with me. 2 words, dance with me. It was not a question. It was not an invitation. It was a command, spoken so quietly it barely disturbed the air, yet it landed in the center of the ballroom with the force of a bomb. Every person in that room heard him. I knew they had. The silence, which had been a heavy blanket, was now a vacuum. It pulled the oxygen from my lungs. Who was I? I was Sophia Bell. I was the girl who rode the subway for 55 minutes every morning to a job that smelled of stale coffee grounds and burnt sugar. I was the girl who bought her textbooks used, with the previous owner's highlights marking all the wrong passages. I was the girl who ate instant noodles for dinner, not as a nostalgic throwback to college, but because it was the third week of the month and payday was still 5 days away. My life was a careful, quiet construction of small, manageable pieces. I had built it myself. Ever since I had left my parents' cramped, perpetually damp apartment at 18, I had left with one small suitcase and a bus ticket. I had worked in diners where the tables were always sticky. I had worked in a bookstore where the owner read my horoscope to me every day and told me my aura was a sad beige. I had worked in thrift stores, sorting through the clothes of the dead, the forgotten, the people who had given up. I was good at it. I could spot quality. I knew the difference between real silk and cheap polyester, the way a good seam was stitched versus a fast fashion knockoff. It was how I had found this dress, buried under a pile of polyester bridesmaid gowns. It had cost me $7.50. It was the most expensive thing I owned. I was not just independent. I was fiercely, painfully independent. My independence was my armor. It was the only thing of value I possessed. I had my one-room apartment with a radiator that clanged like a blacksmith all winter and a view of a brick wall. It was mine. I had my books, stacked high against that wall. They were mine. I had my ideals, shaky as they sometimes felt. I believed in working hard. I believed in being kind. Even when the world was not, I believed in freedom, the kind that meant you could walk away from anything that tried to own you, even if it meant walking away with nothing. I had come to this event tonight because the thrift shop where I worked, Second Act, had donated a large lot of vintage clothing for the charity auction. My boss, a woman with a kind heart and a mistaken belief in my social potential, had insisted I attend. Go, Sophia, she had said, pressing the ticket into my hand. Mingle. See how the other half lives. Now I was seeing, and the other half was terrifying. And the man standing in front of me was not the other half. He was a different world entirely. Vincenzo De Luca. He was not just a man. He was a myth, a dark, New York fairy tale. The boogeyman that billionaires were afraid of. I knew the stories. Everyone did. He was the head of the De Luca family. They did not use words like Mafia. They used words like business and interests and associates. But everyone knew. They owned shipping. They owned construction. They owned half the restaurants in Little Italy and a frightening number of politicians. He was a ghost. He was rarely seen, never interviewed. He was power, the old kind, the kind that did not need to shout. It did not need to flaunt. It simply existed, and the world bent around it. He was a man of rumors. They said he had taken over the family business when he was only 25, after his father had died of a sudden illness that had involved a car bomb. They said he was ruthless. They said he had a strict, almost archaic code of honor, an eye for an eye, but his enemies usually ended up blind. He was a man who lived in shadows, a man who, by all accounts, did not trust anyone. He was surrounded by people, but he was utterly alone. He had to be. In his world, trust was a weakness. It was a vulnerability. It was the space between your ribs where the knife went in. He valued loyalty, which was something else entirely. Loyalty was a transaction, bought with fear or protection. And this man, this creature of shadow and rumor, was standing in front of me, Sophia Bell, the girl who still counted her change. I looked into his eyes. They were dark, as I had first thought, but not empty. They were not cold. They were heavy, weighed down. He looked at me with a terrifying, absolute stillness. He was not looking at my dress. I realized with a jolt, he was not cataloging my poverty. He was just looking at me, at my face, as if he was seeing something no one else had bothered to look for. In this room full of dazzling, polished, perfect surfaces, I was the only thing that was not pretending. My dress was old, my hands were shaking, my fear was real. Everyone else was a performance. They were smiling when they hated each other. They were air-kissing cheeks they had just gossiped about. They were wearing masks of wealth and boredom. I had no mask. Maybe that was it. Maybe to a man who lived in a world of absolute deceit, a man who had to analyze every word for its hidden meaning. My transparency was a shock. Maybe this freedom he saw was not my idealism. Maybe it was just that I had nothing to hide. I had nothing to angle for. I was not trying to marry him or get a donation from him or secure a business deal. I was just a girl in a secondhand dress trying to hide behind a plant. My brain was running in 1,000 directions. It calculated the distance to the exit. It wondered if I could just pretend to faint. It wondered, hysterically, if I had deodorant on. Both arms. Yes, I had, thank God. But my feet were rooted to the floor. The parquet pattern seemed to be holding me in place. He saw the panic. I knew he did. A tiny, almost invisible muscle in his jaw twitched. He was not amused. He was not annoyed. He was just waiting. He had made a statement. The world would now react. And I was the world. He was a contradiction. He was the most powerful man in the room, the most dangerous man I had ever seen. And yet, standing this close, I saw the scar through his eyebrow, the faint lines of exhaustion at the corners of his eyes. He was a man, just a man, who ran a criminal empire. A man who had probably ordered people killed. A man who lived in a fortress of his own making. And he wanted to dance with me. The humor of the situation was almost enough to make me laugh, but the sound died in my throat, choked by terror. This was not a romance novel. This was not a fairy tale. This was a predator, and he had, for some unknowable reason, singled me out. I felt the eyes of the room on me, hundreds of them. They were sharp. They were judgmental. They were assessing. I could feel the heat of their collective stare. The woman with the platinum fox stole was looking at me with undisguised contempt. My quiet life, my small, safe world, my independence. I looked back at Vincenzo De Luca. This was not a choice. He was not asking. He was telling. To refuse in front of all these people would not just be an embarrassment, it would be an insult. And I had a sudden, very clear understanding that people did not insult Vincenzo De Luca and just walk away. My independence felt like a very thin shield. I gave the smallest possible nod, one single jerky motion. His face did not change. He did not smile in triumph. He simply held out his hand. It was a large hand, clean, with short, neat nails, a working man's hand despite the impossibly expensive watch at his wrist. My hand, in its cheap, slightly frayed cotton glove, looked small and ridiculous. Slowly, as if lifting 100-pound weight, I raised my hand. I placed it in his. His grip was not tight. It was not crushing. It was just absolute, warm, and firm. And as he turned, gently, firmly, to lead me to the dance floor, I knew one thing with perfect, terrible clarity. My old life was gone. It had just evaporated, and I had no idea what was coming next. The walk to the dance floor was the longest mile of my life. The whispers followed us, a sibilant, rushing tide of sound. They were not even trying to be quiet. I heard the words, "Who is she? It is a joke. Look at her dress. It is ancient. He's making a point." Vincenzo De Luca seemed not to hear. He held my hand, his thumb resting lightly on my knuckles, and just walked. He did not forge a path. The path simply created itself for him. People scrambled backward, bumping into one another, their faces a mixture of fear and rabid curiosity. They looked like a school of fish avoiding a barracuda. I was being towed in his wake, a piece of seaweed caught on his fin. We reached the center of the vast, polished floor, the orchestra, which had faltered, caught sight of a look from him and struck up a new tune. It was a waltz, slow, elegant, and heavy as a eulogy. He stopped, turned to face me. He put his other hand not on my waist, as I had expected, but on the small of my back. His hand was large and hot. The heat of it burned right through the thin, $7.50 silk of my dress. It was not a gentle placement, it was a claim. It said, "You are mine for this song. You will not stumble. You will not flee." I was rigid. My muscles were locked. I had taken a dance class once, for 2 weeks, at the local community center, before I had to drop it to take on more hours at the coffee shop. I was fairly sure I remembered the box step. Maybe. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice a low rumble just for me. I realized I had not been. I took in a ragged, shuddery gulp of air. He did not wait for me to find the rhythm. He simply moved, and I moved with him. I was not dancing. I was being danced. He was an incredible dancer, fluid and utterly in command. He moved with a precision that was almost military, yet it was graceful. He did not lead. He compelled. My feet, which had been frozen blocks of ice, suddenly knew where to go, because the alternative, being dragged, was far more humiliating. He did not speak again. He just watched me. His dark, impenetrable eyes scanned my face as we turned, slowly, under the glare of the chandeliers. He was not looking at me like a man looks at a woman. He was not admiring me. He was not flirting. He was reading. He was analyzing. It was the most intense, unnerving scrutiny I had ever endured. I felt like a page in a book he was dissecting, his expression never changing, his gaze missing no comma, no period, no tear-stained smudge. I tried to find my voice. I wanted to ask, "Why me?" I wanted to say. "I am not who you think I am." I wanted to beg, "Please let me go." But my throat was sealed shut. The terror and the sheer surreal nature of the moment had stolen my words. The song ended. It had lasted, I was sure, at least 4 years. He did not release me. The music stopped. The orchestra held their bows poised, waiting. The entire ballroom was silent. He held me there, his hand still a brand on my back, his other hand still enveloping mine. He held me for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. It was a display. He was showing them all. I chose this. Look at it. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he let go. He dropped my hand. He stepped back. He gave a single short nod. It was not a bow. It was an acknowledgement of a transaction completed. And then he turned his back on me and walked away. He just left me there, alone, in the absolute center of that enormous, empty dance floor, with hundreds of pairs of eyes boring into me. The spell was broken. The whispers erupted, no longer whispers, but a loud, excited, cruel buzz. The orchestra conductor, seeing Vincenzo retreat, frantically signaled, and a new, more upbeat song started, but it felt like a scream. I was stranded. My blood rushed to my head, and the floor seemed to tilt. I felt hot. Stinging tears of humiliation pricked the backs of my eyes. I wanted to die. I wanted to evaporate. I wanted to be back in my one-room apartment with the clanging radiator. I turned and fled. I did not run, but I walked as fast as I could without breaking into a full-on sprint. My cheap heels, the ones I had bought for my college graduation, clicked loudly, accusingly, on the parquet. I was heading for the grand archway, for the hallway, for the ladies' room, for any dark corner where I could fall apart in private. I had almost made it to the marble arch when a voice cut through the noise. It was a voice I knew, a voice I had not heard in years, but one I had never forgotten. Well, Sophia Bell, as I live and breathe. I stopped. I did not want to turn around, but I did. Jennifer Parsons. No, it was Jennifer Davies now. She'd married some tech billionaire. She stood there, poured into a sleeveless red gown that looked like it was made of liquid rubies. It probably cost more than my entire college tuition. Her hair was a perfect honey blonde sculpture. Her diamonds were real. We had been in the same art history seminar in college. She had been the girl who never took notes, the one who charmed the professor, the one who always had a new car and a crowd of admirers. She'd sometimes adopted me, buying me a coffee and asking me about my quaint little jobs with an air of anthropological fascination. I had hated her. I had envied her. She was everything I was. Not easy, rich, and confident. Now, she was looking at me with that same familiar, amused condescension, but underneath it, there was something new, something sharp and acidic. "My goodness, Sophia," she said, her voice loud enough for the people nearby to hear. She let her eyes travel down my body, from my nervous, sweaty face, all the way down to my mended hem, and then back up again. "You certainly clean up. It is an interesting look. I almost did not recognize you without a canvas tote bag and a smudge of ink on your nose." The old, familiar shame washed over me. I felt small. I felt like that 19-year-old girl in the back of the lecture hall again. "Hello? Jennifer? I just wanted to leave." She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that was as fake as the potted ferns. "Do not tell me you are working this event. Catering, perhaps. Oh, but wait." She tapped a perfectly glossed red lip. "I saw you out there." She gestured with her chin toward the dance floor, clinging to Vincenzo De Luca. "It was quite a show. You looked like a barnacle on the side of a battleship." I should go," I stammered, trying to step around her. She moved, blocking my path, a predator toying with her food. "Oh, no, you do not. I have to hand it to you. Sophie, I always knew you were desperate, but I never pegged you for this desperate." She leaned in, and her perfume, something heavy and sweet, enveloped me. It smelled like wilted lilies, selling yourself to the highest bidder, or, in his case, the most dangerous. Her voice dropped, but it gained a new, sharper edge of malice. "How much is he paying you for the night? It must be a fortune. I mean, to make him publicly associate with, well," she flicked a perfectly manicured finger in the direction of my dress, "with that. You must be very, very good at whatever it is you do." That was it. It was not the fear from Vincenzo. It was not the humiliation of the dance floor. It was this casual, public, gutting cruelty from a woman who had everything aimed at me, who had nothing. She was not just mocking my dress. She was mocking my life. She was implying that the one thing I had, my independence, my integrity, was just a commodity to be sold, that I was a prostitute, and a cheap one at that. A feeling I did not recognize bloomed in my chest. It was not shame. It was not embarrassment. It was rage. It was hot and white, and it burned away everything else. It cleared my head. It steadied my hands. I had spent my entire life being quiet, being polite, making myself small. I had endured the pitying looks, the condescending questions, the social invisibility. I had built a little shell and lived inside it. And in that moment, the shell cracked. Jennifer was right. The world had put me in a box, a small, dusty, second-hand box labeled poor, quiet, harmless. And I had let it. I had stayed inside. No more. I did not know what was happening. I had no plan. I had no idea what I was doing in this glittering, dangerous world. But I knew one thing. I was done running. I was done being small. If then they were going to look at me, if they were going to whisper, I was going to give them something to look at. I stopped trying to escape. I stood up straight. I made myself taller. I looked Jennifer Parsons Davies directly in her cold, surprised eyes. "Maybe you are right, Jennifer," I said. My voice was low, and I was shocked to find it did not shake. Maybe I am desperate. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. But at least I'm interesting enough for a man like him to dance with. He did not even know you were in the room. I saw the flash of fury in her eyes, the way her perfect lips thinned, before she could recover, before she could unleash her next volley of insults. I turned. But I did not go to the ladies' room. I did not flee to the exit. Head high, back straight, I turned and I walked right back into the ballroom. Walking back into that room was like plunging my hands into a fire. My skin screamed in protest, but that new, cold rage held me together. I did not look at Jennifer's stunned, furious face. I did not look at anyone. I kept my chin up, my shoulders back, and pretended my $7 dress was a suit of armor. Every eye was on me. I could feel the physical weight of their stares. But they were no longer just dismissive. They were confused. They were intrigued. The sparrow had not flown away. It was puffing up its feathers. I walked straight to the long, gleaming mahogany bar that ran along the far wall. I did not belong there any more than I had 10 minutes ago, but my feet carried me forward. A bartender, who looked like he should be modeling suits, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "May I help you, Miss?" His tone was polite, but his eyes said, "You are lost." "Club soda," I said. My voice was still steady. "With lime." He stared for a second, probably used to orders for champagne that cost $400 a bottle. But he turned and made the drink. As he set the small glass on the napkin, a shadow fell over me. I did not have to look. I could smell the expensive whiskey and the ozone. Vincenzo De Luca had followed me. He did not stand next to me. When he stood behind me, a presence so total it felt like a wall. I could feel his body heat. The bartender's hands, which had been so steady, fumbled as he polished a glass. "They did not like that," Vincenzo said. His voice was a low murmur, meant only for me. I gripped my glass. The condensation was cold against my hot skin. "They do not like me." "That is not what I said." He paused. "You did not run." It was not a question. It was an observation. I was tired of running, I said, surprising myself. I looked at his reflection in the mirror behind the bar, and he was not looking at me, and he was scanning the room, his dark eyes missing nothing. He was a king surveying his court, and he had just seen his jester stand up to a duchess. "Jennifer Davies," he said, and my blood froze. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. "Her husband owes me a great deal of money. She talks too much." I seared at his reflection. He met my gaze in the glass. His expression was flat, unreadable. "You have spirit, man," he said. "It is wasted in a thrift shop." He put a black card on the bar. "My driver will take you home when you are ready." Then he was gone. He did not wait for a reply. He simply vanished back into the crowd, which parted for him and swallowed him whole. The bartender was looking at the card and then at me, with a completely new expression. It was respect. It was fear. He pushed my club soda toward me. "On the house, miss." I did not stay long. The card sat on the bar like a small, black bomb. I finished my drink, my hands shaking again, the rage ebbing and leaving a cold, shaky exhaustion in its place. I walked out of the ballroom, and this time, no one spoke to me. They just watched. The next 2 days were a blur. I went to work. I sorted a box of musty coats. I rang up a woman buying a stack of old romance novels. My boss, Maria, asked me how the party was. I told her it was an experience. I did not mention Vincenzo De Luca. I did not mention Jennifer. My normal life felt like a costume. It was ill-fitting, and I could suddenly see all the cheap seams. The clanging radiator in my apartment, which had always been a familiar comfort, now just sounded broken. On the third day, as I was leaving work, a black sedan, the kind that costs more than a house, slid to the curb in front of me. The window went down. A man I did not recognize, with a broad face and a thick neck, looked at me. "Miss Bell, Mr. De Luca requests your presence." Again, not a question. It was the story of my life now. My heart hammered. This was it. This was where I found out what the price was. For the dance, for the card, for something. But the memory of Jennifer's face, twisted in ugly spite, came back to me, and the thought of just going back to my apartment and eating noodles felt impossible. I got in the car. The car did not take me to a glittering tower. It took me to a quiet, unassuming restaurant in Little Italy, a place called Il Corvo. The Raven, there was no sign, just a carved black bird over a heavy wooden door. The man led me through the quiet, dark wood dining room, past tables of men in expensive suits eating pasta and speaking in low, rapid Italian, and up a narrow flight of stairs to a private office. Vincenzo De Luca was behind a massive, ancient-looking desk. He was not in a suit. He wore a simple, dark gray cashmere sweater that made him look, younger, almost human, almost. Another man was in the room, standing by the window. He was the opposite of Vincenzo. He was shorter, stockier, and dressed in a suit so shiny it looked wet. He had a brilliant, toothy smile, but it did not reach his eyes. His eyes were cold and flat, like two polished stones. "Ah, the little bird," the new man said, his voice slick and friendly. He clapped his hands together. "Vincenzo, you have exquisite taste in charity cases." "Rocco, enough," Vincenzo said, his voice flat. He did not look up from a ledger he was reading. So this was Rocco. I had heard the name whispered in the restaurant downstairs. Rocco De Luca, Vincenzo's cousin. Rocco looked me up and down, his smile widening. "No, truly, it is a work of art, taking this little mouse and putting her in the center of the floor. A masterpiece of humiliation. For her, of course, but also for Jennifer Davies. You hit two birds with one stone. Cousin." Vincenzo looked up. His gaze was cold. "I am busy. Rocco, go and inspect the kitchens. Make sure the cannoli are fresh." Rocco's smile tightened. He knew he was being dismissed, and he hated it. He hated me for being the reason. He gave me one last, lingering look. A pleasure mouse. He bowed, a low, mocking gesture, and left the room, closing the door with a sharp click. "He does not like me," I said, stating the obvious. "Rocco does not like anything he cannot control or break," Vincenzo said. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sit." I sat. The leather was soft as butter. "You are wondering why you are here," he said. I had assumed it was to pay for the dance. For the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched. It was not a smile. It was the memory of one. The dance was illuminating. "I saw you. I saw what you were. And then I saw you with Jennifer Davies. I saw what you are not." He pushed a thin folder across the desk. "You were at a charity event. My family contributes to that charity. A significant amount, 10% of their operating budget. But their numbers, they do not make sense." I opened the folder. It was a financial report. "I do not understand. I am not an accountant." "You do not need to be an accountant to spot a lie," he said. "You work in a thrift shop. You know the value of things. You know when something is real and when it is a fake." His dark eyes met mine. "You are the only person in that entire ballroom who was real. Look at the numbers. Tell me what you see." This was not what I had expected. I had expected a proposition, an indecent one. I had expected a threat. I had expected a dismissal. I had not expected a job. I spent 3 hours in that office. At first, my hands shook, but the numbers were just numbers. And he was right. They were wrong. The reported donations were high, but the administrative costs were insane. 20% for consulting fees. $30,000 for event printing. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. "They are stealing," I said finally. "Right here, these consulting fees. They are padding them, and this event printing. I helped set up the auction. The programs were printed on cheap cardstock. This is maybe $3,000 of printing, not 30. He watched me, his face impassive. "How do you know?" "Because the paper felt cheap," I said, "and the ink was smudged." He nodded slowly. "Go on." I kept going. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. I was good at this. I was good at seeing the cracks, the cheap seams, the places where things did not add up. When I was finished, he took the papers back. Good. You see what my expensive accountants missed. They were looking for complicated fraud. You were looking for cheap ink. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street. You will continue this. You will work for me. Doing what? Your taxes. The joke was out before I could stop it. No, he said, turning. You will be my verification. You will look at things, people, numbers, and you will tell me if they are real or fake. He paused. Rocco. He brought Jennifer Davies' husband to me. He vouched for him, said his business was sound. My blood ran cold. Rocco, Jennifer. I will pay you $5,000 a week. I stopped breathing. That was more than I made in 6 months. Why? Because you are not afraid to be poor, he said, his voice quiet. That makes you harder to buy than any of those people in that ballroom. And because I trust you. He said the word trust like it was a foreign object, something he was still learning the feel of. It hung in the air between us, heavy and dangerous. I should have said no. I should have run. My life, my simple, independent, safe life was calling to me. But I thought of Jennifer's face. I thought of Rocco's slick, contemptuous smile, and I thought of the $5,000. Okay, I said. As I was leaving the restaurant, a man was entering. He was handsome, in a brutal, careless way, with slicked back hair and a suit that was almost as flashy as Rocco's. He was laughing and clinging to his arm. Laughing with him was Jennifer Davies. She did not see me. She was too busy looking up at her companion, but the man, he saw me. He saw me leaving the private staircase. His laughter died. His eyes, a pale, cold blue, raked over me. It was a look of such sudden, intense malice that I flinched. He said something to Jennifer, who looked over, and her face went white with rage. I hurried out into the late afternoon. My heart was pounding. That night, I went home to my apartment. I unlocked my 3 deadbolts. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air was cold. My window was open. I never left my window open. And laid out on my small, lumpy bed, as if it were on display in a museum, was my emerald green thrift store dress. Nothing was gone. My laptop was still on the table. The $40 I kept in a tea tin was still there. But the dress, it was a message. We know who you are. We know where you live. You are not safe. I backed out of the apartment, my hand over my mouth. I ran down the 3 flights of stairs, my breath catching in my throat. I stood on the sidewalk, shaking. I could run. I could pack my 1 suitcase and get on a bus. I could go back to being invisible. Or he. I pulled out the black card Vincenzo had given me. It just had a name and a number. I took out my cheap, cracked screen phone. I dialed. The phone rang only twice before he answered. It was not a hello. It was a command. DeLuca. My voice was a raw, trembling whisper. I could not get the words out. My apartment. I went home. It is... They... Sophia, speak. His voice was sharp, cutting through the panic. My dress, I gasped, the words finally tumbling out. The green one, the one from the party. Someone broke in. It is on my bed. They put it on my bed. Vincenzo. There was a silence on the line. It was not shock. It was not sympathy. It was a cold, terrifying calculation. I heard the distant sound of a car horn. I was just standing on the sidewalk, shaking. Where are you? He stated. It was not a question. On the street, outside. I ran. I ran. Stay there. The line clicked dead. I did not know how long I waited. It felt like an hour. It was probably less than 3 minutes. The same black sedan that had taken me to Il Corvo slid to the curb, a silent black predator. The back door opened. He was inside, bathed in the dim, ambient light of the dashboard. Get in! I scrambled in, my hands fumbling with the handle. The door closed with a heavy, final thud. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent. He did not look at me. He looked straight ahead, out the windshield, at the city flying by. He did not ask if I was all right. He did not ask what had happened. He did not speak at all. I sat there, clutching my cheap purse, my knuckles white. I was still shaking, violent, bone-deep tremors. We drove for 15 minutes. We did not go downtown. We went up. We crossed into the wealthiest part of the city, where the buildings were old and dripped with limestone carvings. The car eased into a private, underground garage. We took a private elevator. It opened not into a hallway, but directly into an apartment. No, it was not an apartment, it was a sky. It was a penthouse that seemed to float over the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and cold. "You will stay here," he said, shrugging out of his suit jacket. "The bedroom is through there. Rosa will bring you whatever you need." "But my job," I whispered. My things." "You have a new job," he said, turning to look at me for the first time. His eyes were dark, flat. "And you have no other things. Not anymore." That was how I moved into Vincenzo De Luca's fortress. My life at the thrift shop, my small, independent world was over. It had been erased by a second-hand dress laid on a lumpy bed. The next few weeks were a strange, airless dream. The verification job became my entire existence. I was no longer looking at the falsified books of charities. I was looking at the real books of a criminal empire. He would sit in his study, a room walled in dark wood and smelling of old leather and his peaty whiskey. I would sit at the massive dining table, the city glittering like a carpet of fallen stars below me, and I would read shipping manifests, warehouse inventories, payrolls for businesses I was sure did not actually exist. And I found the lies. My mind, the one that had been trained to spot a mended seam, a fake pearl, a cheap dye, it saw the patterns. "This one," I said one night, holding up a ledger. "The fish distributor in the Bronx. The fuel costs are wrong. They are 30% too high for the routes. Someone is siphoning. A lot." Vincenzo just nodded, his face illuminated by the green glow of his desk lamp. "I know." You know, I wanted to see if you would see it, where he said, "You see the small things. Sophia, the things everyone else misses. The cheap ink." I was not his partner. I was not his lover. I was his test, his canary in a coal mine. And in this strange, sterile, luxurious prison, I felt a bizarre kind of power. I was needed. But the tension in the penthouse was getting thicker. Vincenzo was on edge. He paced. He took calls in the middle of the night, speaking in low, rapid Italian that I could not understand. The name I heard over and over, though, was Rocco. And Marconi. One night, he stood at the vast window, looking down at the river of headlights. "Rocco brings me a deal," he said, his voice flat. He was speaking to the glass. "A peace treaty with Salvatore Marconi." Even I knew that name, Marconi. The family that had been at war with the De Lucas for a generation. The old enemy. Rocco says Marconi is tired. He's old. He wants to end the bad blood. He offers us control of the northern shipping lanes. "It is a lie," I said, without looking up from my papers. He turned. "You cannot know that." It is too easy, my Noah," I said. "It is like that charity. The numbers were too sloppy. This is too clean. Peace after 20 years, it is a performance. It is a fake." "Rocco is family," Vincenzo said, his voice dangerously soft. He vouched for the deal. "Rocco," I said, "is the one skimming from the fish market." A heavy silence filled the room. He stared at me, his face an unreadable mask. "You are certain?" "He uses his cousin's trucking company, the one that is supposed to be defunct. The numbers match." Vincenzo's jaw tightened. That was it. The muscle jumped. He is stupid, and he is greedy. He turned back to the window. "But this meeting, it is set. It is a matter of honor. I must go." "It is a trap, Vincenzo." "I know," he said. "You will stay here. Rosa will lock the door. You will not leave this room." He left an hour later. I watched him go, flanked by two men who looked like they were carved from granite. I waited. I paced the marble floors. I looked at the glittering, indifferent city. This was not me. I was not the girl who waited, locked in a tower, while the world happened outside. I was the girl who had walked back into the ballroom. I was the girl who had seen the lie. I went to his study. The address for the meeting was on his desk blotter. Pier 14, Warehouse 3. I faced Rosa. She was a stern, older woman who always wore black and had the saddest, wisest eyes I had ever seen. "He will kill me if I let you go, child." "He will be killed if I do not." "No," I said. She stared at me for a long time. Then she stepped aside from the elevator. "God be with you." I took a cab. The driver was terrified to go to that part of the docks at night. I gave him $200, all the money I had in my purse. The warehouse was a vast, cold tomb. It smelled of brine, rust, and something rotten. I slipped in through a side door that was slightly ajar. They were there, in the center of the cavernous space, illuminated by a few bare, hanging bulbs. Vincenzo, still calm, and flanked by his two men. Across from him, Salvatore Marconi, an older, Guinellas heavy man in a camel hair coat, with a half-dozen men behind him. And right next to Marconi, smiling his slick, wet smile, was Rocco. "Vincenzo," Marconi was saying, his voice a gravelly rumble. "You came. A smart man. Rocco here. He's a smart boy. He says you are a reasonable man." "I am a businessman, Sal," Vincenzo said. His voice was calm, but it echoed in the huge space. "Rocco brings me a deal. I am here to hear it." "The deal is simple," Rocco said, stepping forward. He was practically vibrating with self-importance. "We end the old ways. We split the harbor. 50-50, a new era. Marconi is happy. We are happy." I shrank behind a stack of wooden crates, my heart beating so hard I was sure they could hear it. 50-50. I knew Vincenzo's business. That was not a deal. That was a surrender. 50-50, Vincenzo repeated. His voice was soft, deadly. "That is generous, considering all the blood." "The blood," Marconi said, "is why we make peace. We are too old for this." This was the trap. Vincenzo had to choose, accept public humiliation and lose his power, or refuse and be slaughtered in an ambush, because I could see it now. Marconi's men were tense, ready, and two of the men behind Vincenzo. I recognized them. They were Rocco's men. They were not here to protect their boss. "Rocco," I heard myself say. My voice was small, but it cut through the tension like a razor. Every single person in the warehouse froze. 20 heads turned. They saw me, standing by the crates, in my simple jeans and coat, looking like a lost college student. "Sophia," Vincenzo's voice was a low, guttural roar. "I told you to stay. Get out, now." She is the one, cousin," Rocco laughed, a high, nervous sound. "This is your advisor, the little mouse. She is the one who found your ghost containers." "Rocco," I said, stepping into the light. My voice was shaking, but I could not, be silent. Rocco's smile vanished. "Mr. Marconi," I said, walking toward the old man. Vincenzo took a step, as if to stop me, but I ignored him. "Mr. Marconi, he is lying to you." "Who the hell is this?" Marconi growled, his hand going inside his coat. "I am the one who reads the books," I said, standing my ground. "He offered you 50% of the harbor. He is lying. He's offering you 50% of a business he is already skimming. He's been stealing from Vincenzo for a year. He's stealing from you, too. He faked the manifests he showed you." "She is crazy," Rocco shrieked. "She is a whore, Vincenzo. Shut her up." "Is she?" I looked at Marconi. Ask him about the Neptune's Trident shipment, the one from last month, the medical supplies. He told Vincenzo it was lost in a storm. He told you it was a customs seizure. I found the buyer. In Philadelphia, Rocco sold the entire container for $300,000. Marconi's sad eyes turned, very slowly, to Rocco. The color drained from Rocco's face. He was trapped, his slick words, his easy charm. It was all gone. There was just the cheap, ugly truth. Rocco, Marconi asked, his voice a whisper. Vincenzo had not moved. He was watching me. Not with anger, not with shock, with a strange, dark, terrifying intensity. He was seeing me, all of me, for the first time. It happened in a heartbeat. Rocco knew he was finished. He was a cornered rat. He did not go for Marconi. He did not go for me. He pulled a small, silver pistol from his belt and aimed it straight at Vincenzo, the source of all his failure, the man he could never be. "Vincenzo!" I screamed. I did not think. I did not plan. I did not weigh the options. I ran. I threw myself at Vincenzo, my shoulder connecting with his chest, just as the gun cracked. The sound was deafening. It was followed by a feeling I cannot describe, a white-hot, agonizing explosion in my left shoulder. It was a punch. It was a fire. It was a bolt of lightning. The force of it spun me around and threw me to the concrete floor. My vision flared white, then gray. I heard more shots. 2, 3, shouting. Men yelling in Italian. The smell of gunpowder was acrid in my throat. I tried to breathe. My chest would not work. I looked down. My coat was dark and wet and spreading. Then I heard him. He was on the ground next to me. "Sophia." He was on his knees. He had ripped off his jacket and was pressing it against my shoulder. His hands, his strong, steady hands, were shaking. "No, no, no, no," he was chanting, his voice raw, unrecognizable. "Sophia, look at me. Guarda me. Do not close your eyes. Stay with me." His face, his perfect, impassive, controlled mask was shattered. He was covered in my blood, and in his eyes, his dark, impenetrable eyes, I saw something that terrified me more than the bullet. I saw pure, unadulterated panic. You are," I tried to whisper. Be quiet, he commanded, but his voice broke. He looked up, roaring at one of his men. Get the car, now muoversi." He looked back at me. He was just a man, a terrified man. He had seen death. He had probably caused it. But this, my blood, on his hands, this was different. He saw it. I had not just been a test. I had not just been a tool. I had been his shield. I told you," I whispered, as the gray corners of my vision turned to black. "It was a fake." The last thing I felt before the world dissolved was his hand, tangled in my hair, pressing my face against his chest. "You are safe," he whispered. A broken promise. "You are safe." The first sensation was not pain. It was silk. I was lying on sheets that felt like cool water. The second sensation was the smell, antiseptic and something sharp, like alcohol. The third sensation was the pain. It was a deep, heavy, throbbing fire in my left shoulder, a beast that had settled in my bones and was now waking up, pulsing with every beat of my heart. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, but I knew, instinctively, that I was not in a hospital. The silence was too complete. The air was too clean. I was in his bedroom, the one I had never been in. It was vast, all dark wood and shades of charcoal gray. The city lights were a muted, distant glow behind the thick curtains. He was there. He was not in bed. He was in a large leather armchair in the corner, unmoving, watching me. He was still wearing the suit from the warehouse. It was ruined. His jacket was gone. His expensive white shirt was covered in my blood. It was dark, dried, and flaked. He had not shaved. The stubble cast a dark shadow over his harsh jaw. The lines around his eyes, the ones I had only glimpsed, were now deep canyons of exhaustion. He looked like a man who had been to hell and had not yet found his way back. "Sophia," he said, His voice was not a rumble. It was a rasp. "You—" I tried to speak. My throat was sandpaper. "You are all right." He stood up, his body moving with a stiff, pained grace. He walked to the bed. He did not touch me. "I am unhurt." He poured water from a crystal carafe into a glass. His hand, I saw, was not perfectly steady. He held the glass to my lips. "Drink." I drank. The cool water was a blessing. "The bullet," he said, setting the glass down. "It went through clean. Dr. Costas said it missed the artery, it missed the bone. He said, you were very lucky." "Dr. Costas," I whispered. "My doctor," he said, his voice flat. "Not a hospital. It is safer here. He has experience with this." Of course he did. I could only imagine. I tried to sit up, but the fire in my shoulder exploded into a white-hot agony. A gasp, half scream, tore from my throat. "Do not move," he commanded, and his hands were on my good shoulder, gently, firmly pressing me back into the pillows. "He gave you something for the pain. It will return." Rocco, I had to know. The images from the warehouse were a fragmented, terrifying slideshow. The gun, the sound, the blood. Marconi? Vincenzo's face, which had been raw with exhaustion, hardened. The mask I knew so well clicked back into place, but it was cracked, like porcelain that had been dropped. "Rocco is gone." He said the word with a finality that was colder than the concrete floor of that warehouse. "He will not be a problem for anyone, ever again." I closed my eyes. I did not need to ask what that meant. "And Marconi—" "We have an understanding," Vincenzo said. He walked to the window, pulling back the curtain an inch, peering down at the city. "Salvatore Marconi is an old man, but he is a man of honor in his own way. He does not like liars. He does not like being played for a fool. You exposed Rocco. You gave Marconi the truth. He appreciates that. The peace is real, for now. But the man—" "With Jennifer," I said, remembering. "The one at the restaurant, the one who hated me." "Anthony Gallo," Vincenzo said, his voice tight. "Rocco's partner, Jennifer's associate. They were all in it. They were using Rocco to get to me, and planning to use Marconi to get rid of Rocco. A world of snakes." So we are targets," I whispered. The cold fear was back. "He is still out there." "Gallo has vanished," Vincenzo said, letting the curtain fall. "He is a coward. He knows Rocco failed. He's in the wind, but Jennifer, she is not. She's screaming. She's telling everyone she knows that I am a monster, that I destroyed her lover, that I ruined her. She is loud." "She is dangerous," I said, desperate. "Yes." He turned to face me. He stood in the shadows, a tall, dark outline. "Which brings me back to you." I held my breath. "Why?" he asked. His voice was low, stripped of all its command, all its ice. It was just a question. "Why did you come? I told you to stay. I told you it was a trap. I told Rosa to lock you in." "Rosa, she let me go." "I know," he said. "Why did you go?" I thought about it. The terror, the cab ride, the cold smell of the pier. "I do not know," I said. And it was the absolute truth. I knew it was a lie. I knew he was a fake. I could not just sit there in this beautiful prison and let the lie win. I am tired of being small. I am tired of being afraid. "You were afraid," he stated. "I was terrified," I admitted. "But I am more afraid of being a coward." He was silent for a long, long time. Then he did something that shocked me more than the gunshot. He came and sat on the edge of the bed. It was an intimacy, a vulnerability I had never seen. He did not look at me. He looked at his hands, his strong, steady, capable hands, which I had seen shake as he pressed his jacket to my wound. "My father," he said, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear him, "he was a good man, a weak man. He trusted everyone. He loved the noise, the parties, the fake smiles. He said it was good business. He thought my uncle, Rocco's father, loved him. He was the one, I whispered. He set him up for Marcone, the old war, a car bomb. Vincenzo's voice was flat, dead, reciting a history he had memorized. I was 24. I was supposed to be in the car. I was late. I pulled him from the fire. I held him. He looked up, and his eyes, they were not a mask. They were a raw, open wound. He looked at me, and he was surprised, even as he was dying. He was surprised that his brother would do that, and I swore on his blood. I would never be weak. I would never trust, and I would never be surprised. He looked at me, at my face on his pillow, at my bandaged shoulder. I spent 10 years building a fortress. I lived inside it. I looked at every single person and I saw the lie. I saw the angle. I saw the price. Every single one. And then, he said, his voice rough, I saw you at the party in that green dress. You were terrified. You were real. You were the only real thing in a room full of fakes. You were not pretending. You were not bought. I thought you were just a better liar, he admitted. A new kind of fake. I brought you here. I tested you. I gave you the books. I waited for you to ask for something, to show your price. Vincenzo. And in that warehouse, you moved. He said the word like it was an explosion. You took a bullet for me. You did the one thing no one in my world, no one, ever does. You acted against your own self-interest. He reached out, his fingers tracing the edge of the bandage on my shoulder. His touch was feather-light, but it burned like a brand. You, Sophia, you surprised me. That was it, the word he had built his entire life around, avoiding. He trusted me, not because I was smart, not because I was useful, but because I had done something so completely, utterly irrational that it was the only thing in his world he knew to be true. I was real. The next few weeks, I healed Rosa, who'd been so stern, now treated me with a gruff, maternal affection. She made me soup. She changed my bandages. She clucked her tongue. You are stupid, child, she would say, her sad eyes soft, but coraggiosa, brave. Vincenzo did not leave the penthouse. He ran his empire from his study, but every night we ate dinner together and we talked and he listened. He asked about my life, about the thrift shop, about my parents, and I asked him about I learned about the machinery of his world, the violence, the compromises, the dark, terrible truths that held it all together. The honor was a thin veneer over a core of pure, brutal pragmatism. The closer we became, the more the tension in the penthouse grew. The threat from Gallo and Jennifer was still out there, a shadow in the corners of the room. We were safe in our fortress, but it was a prison. We have to end this, he said one night. I was finally dressed, my arm in a sling. We were standing by the great window, the city glittering below us. Gallo is trying to make a deal with a crew from Chicago. He's offering them my territory. And Jennifer, she is meeting with a reporter. She's trying to burn my world down. So what do you do? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The old answer. You make them disappear. It is the only way, he said. His face was hard. The dawn was back. No, I said. He turned, his eyes narrowing. No. I stepped in front of him. I was not the girl from the thrift shop anymore. I was not the girl who had been frozen in the ballroom. I was the woman who had taken a bullet for this man. I had earned the right to speak. You do that, Vincenzo, and you are trapped forever. You will just be waiting for the next Rocco, the next Gallo. You will spend the rest of your life in this beautiful empty box, waiting for the next betrayal. You will never be free. You will just be a different kind of prisoner." "Freedom," he laughed, a short, harsh, bitter sound. "There is no freedom for me, Sophia. This is my blood. This is my name. This is the only world there is." "Then change it," I said, my voice fierce. I put my good hand on his chest. I felt his heart, steady and strong, beneath my palm. "This world you live in, it is all fakes. It is all lies. It is all cheap ink and bad seams. You said it yourself." "So what?" he asked, his voice rough. We go to Florida and sell seashells." "We do not run," I said. "We change it. From the inside. You have the power. You have the money. You use it for something else. You use it to build, not just to break." "It is not that simple," he growled. "My men, Marconi, the families, they only understand one thing: strength." You showed them strength," I countered. "You survived a betrayal that should have killed you. You made peace with your oldest enemy. You won. Now, show them something else. Show them profit." He was listening. His dark eyes were fixed on mine, searching. "The charity," I said, the idea forming, hot and bright. "The one from the party. They were stealing. You know who else is stealing all of them? All those foundations, all those community projects. They are all just fakes. You can do it for real." "You want me to be a philanthropist?" He looked at me as if I were insane. "I want you to be smart," I shot back. "I want you to be the man who sees the cheap ink. This criminal world. It is dying, Vincenzo. It is a second-hand dress. It is old. It is falling apart. Jennifer, Gallo, they are just moths, eating the holes. You can build something new, something real, something that lasts." This was my choice. This was the path. Not to run, not to join the darkness, but to build a light inside the darkness. He stared at me for a long time, the city lights reflected in his unreadable eyes. He was a man caught between two worlds, the one he was born into and the one I was trying to show him. Finally, he reached out. He did not touch my face. He touched my scarred shoulder, his fingers tracing the new, ugly line through my shirt. You are a terrible risk, Sophia Bell." "So are you," I whispered. This new world," he said. "It will be more dangerous than the old one. They will see it as weakness." "No," I said, leaning into his touch. "They will see it as power. The real kind. The kind they cannot fight. The kind they will envy." He closed his eyes, and Jennifer and Gallo. "You do not need a bullet to destroy them," I said, my voice cold. I had learned a few things from him. "You just need the truth. Jennifer is meeting with a reporter, good? I will give him the real story. About her husband, about Gallo, about the charity. I will bury her in facts. I will use the one thing they hate, the truth, the cheap ink." He opened his eyes, and for the second time, I saw him, the real him, the man behind the mask. He smiled. It was not a twitch. It was a full, slow, devastating smile. "They will never see you coming," he said. "No," I said, "they will not." He pulled me to him, his arms circling my waist, careful of my shoulder. He buried his face in my hair. This is the future. Then our plan." "It is," I whispered, holding on to him. "This monster, this savior, this man. Ours." It did not begin with a bullet. It ended with a file. My plan was not just a defense. It was an offensive. While I healed, my arm first in a sling and then just an angry, stiff ache, I worked. Vincenzo did not just give me access. He gave me his resources. The men who used to break legs were now breaking into data servers. The men who ran numbers rackets were now tracing offshore accounts. My verification job took on a new, lethal precision. I did not just find the cheap ink, I found the source. Anthony Gallo, Jennifer Davies, her husband. It was not just a conspiracy to defraud Vincenzo, it was a vast, now interlocking network of shell companies and ghost corporations. They had been stealing from everyone for years. Jennifer was meeting with a reporter, a man named Thomas Hayes, known for his aggressive, take-no-prisoners financial investigations. She thought she was going to feed him a story about the big, bad mafia boss. She thought she was going to be a grieving, wronged woman. She underestimated the sparrow. I met Thomas Hayes first. I did not meet him at the penthouse. I met him in a small, anonymous coffee shop in Midtown, the kind I used to work in. I wore a simple black dress and my hair pulled back. My shoulder ached under the fabric. He was wary. This reporter, he saw me as one of Vincenzo's associates. "I am not here to threaten you, Mr. Hayes," I said, placing a simple, thick manila envelope on the table between us. "I am here to give you the truth. You are being played." "Is that so?" he said, his eyes skeptical. "You're being fed a story by Jennifer Davies. She's painting herself as a victim, her lover, Anthony Gallo, as a casualty of the mob." I pushed the envelope toward him. "The truth is, they are the criminals. They were partners with Rocco De Luca, and they were trying to defraud both Salvatore Marconi and Vincenzo De Luca. They were playing two ends against the middle." He looked at the envelope. He did not touch it. "And why would I believe you?" "Because you are a reporter," I said. "You follow the money. I'm not giving you a story. I am giving you receipts inside that envelope. You will find the offshore bank records for Gallo. You will find the wire transfers to Jennifer's private account. You will find the falsified invoices from her husband's companies, the ones he used to launder the money. And you will find the name of the real victim in all this." "Vincenzo De Luca," he scoffed. "No," I said, and his face changed. "The second act charity, the one from the gala, they were the original target. They were just the test run. Gallo, Davies, and her husband. They were planning to do the same thing to every major charity in New York." I had him. It was no longer a mob story. It was a story of the rich elite preying on the poor. "I am the woman who found the cheap ink," I said, standing up. "You just follow the money. It is all there." The story broke 2 days later. It was not just a story. It was a detonation. It was the front page of every paper. Thomas Hayes had not just written an article. He had unleashed an indictment, the district attorney, smelling blood and high-profile convictions, launched an immediate investigation. Jennifer's husband was arrested by noon. His assets were frozen. Jennifer's name, linked to the offshore accounts, was ruined. She was not a victim. She was a co-conspirator. The woman who had sneered at my $7 dress was now the subject of tabloid headlines, her face pale and furious, being led away by her own expensive lawyers. Anthony Gallo, his name and face now plastered everywhere, his Chicago contacts having evaporated the second the story hit, had nowhere to run. He was arrested trying to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands. It was clean. It was total. And it was silent. Vincenzo stood at the window of his study, the newspaper, with its blaring headlines spread on his desk. He had watched the news report on television. He had seen Jennifer's face crumble. "It is complete," he said. He sounded impressed. "More complete than bullets. You did not just stop her. You erased her." "I used the truth," I said, coming to stand beside him. "It is a much sharper weapon. They will be in prison for 10, maybe 15 years, he mused. "And when they get out, they will have nothing. No one." He looked at me, his dark eyes holding a new, profound respect. "It is a colder, more elegant revenge. Sophia, I am impressed." That was the end of the old world, but it was the beginning of the new one. The opposition came. Just as I had predicted, the other families, the old guard, they did not understand, and Vincenzo De Luca. The man who had taken over his family with such brutal efficiency had gone soft. He was listening to a woman. He was letting his enemies be arrested, not buried. They called a meeting, the commission, all the heads of the families, including Salvatore Marconi. They met in the private dining room of Il Corvo. I walked in with him. The room fell silent. The air was thick with cigar smoke and disapproval. 8 men, all older, all with faces like stone, stared at me. This is not a place for women. One of them, a man named Titalia, growled. This, Vincenzo said, his voice a quiet, cold command, is my verifier. She is my voice. Where I go, she goes. You have a problem with her. You have a problem with me. Marconi, the old man, just watched, and he had not said a word. You have gone soft, Vincenzo, Titalia said. This newspaper business, letting the police handle your problems. It is weak. It is American. It is smart, I said, stepping forward. Vincenzo did not stop me. All eyes snapped to me. You call it weakness, I said, my voice clear and steady in the smoky room. I call it profit. How much did you lose last year, Mr. Titalia? In conflicts, how much product was seized by the feds because one of your men got sloppy? How much did you pay in legal fees for men who talked too much? The man's face darkened. Vincenzo, we just eliminated a competitor, took over his entire operation and neutered a political enemy, all without firing a single shot. The police thanked us for it. Our hands are clean. Our ledgers are balanced. That is not weakness. That is the future. Your way. The old way. It is just bad business. My business, another man snarled. We are not merchants. You are, I said. You just pretend not to be. But your business is failing. It is a thrift shop. It is old. It is full of fakes. We are offering a new model. Legitimacy. I laid our plan on the table. The DeLuca Foundation. A real one? We would use Vincenzo's construction companies to build low-income housing. We would use his shipping to import medical supplies for free clinics. We would use his security to actually protect the neighborhoods that paid him. You want to be a charity? Titalia was disgusted. I want to be untouchable, Vincenzo said, his voice cutting in. I want to own the politicians legally. I want to have the people on my side, not because they fear me, but because I give them what the city will not. I want the police to have nothing to investigate, and all the while, our other interests will be cleaner, quieter, and 100% more profitable, because they will be hidden behind a wall of genuine goodwill. Marconi looked at me, then he looked at Vincenzo, when he took a long, slow pull from his cigar. The girl, she is right, the old man rumbled. The world is changing, the old ways. They are loud, they are sloppy. This is a better way. It is elegant. He tapped his cigar. I am in. That was it. The old world cracked. The new one began. It was not a fairy tale. We were not good. We were not redeemed. We were just smarter. I became the face of the foundation. I was the girl from the streets, the one who had gotten lucky, the one who was now giving back. I went to the old neighborhoods. I listened. I found the cheap ink in the city's budgets, the places the money was being stolen, and I used Vincenzo's power to fix it. We became more powerful than any bullet could have made us. We became beloved, and the money, the real money, flowed. Our legitimate businesses flourished, and our other interests, they were protected, just as Vincenzo had planned. We were still in the shadows, but the shadows were now respectable. 1 year later, we were in a ballroom again. It was the Grand Plaza, the same one, but it was not their party, it was ours. It was the first annual gala for the DeLuca Foundation. The room was filled with the same people, the rich, the elite, the politicians. But they were not looking at us with scorn. They were looking at us with fear, with respect. They were clamoring to give us their money. I was not in a $7 dress. I wore a gown of midnight blue silk, designed just for me. It had cost. I did not even know. It did not matter. My shoulder was healed, but the scar was still there. A thin, white line I saw every morning, a reminder. I saw a girl by the ferns. She was young, nervous, a junior assistant to some senator. Probably she looked invisible. She looked just like me. I walked over to her. She looked up, startled. "Hello," I said, and her eyes went wide. She knew who I was. "Are you enjoying the party?" Yes, Miss Bell, it is amazing." "Good," I said, and smiled, a real smile. "Make sure you try the champagne. It is the real thing." I turned and walked back to the center of the room. He was there, waiting for me. Vincenzo. He wore a black suit, tailored from shadows. He was still the most dangerous man I had ever known. He was still my monster, but he was mine. He was not looking at the room. He was not scanning for threats. He was just watching me. His dark eyes, which I now knew so well, were not cold. They were not empty. They were filled with a fierce, quiet, absolute pride. The orchestra began to play a waltz. He held out his hand. "Sophia," he said, and his voice was a low, warm rumble. "Just for me. Dance with me." This time, it was not a command. It was a question. I placed my hand in his, always. We moved on to the floor, and the room, it did not part for us. It turned to watch. We were not invisible. We were not fakes. We were the only real thing in the room. We had built our own world, from the inside out, and in this world, we were finally, terrifyingly, free. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm so curious to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really loved it, please hit that hype button to help this story get out to even more people.